Hey, it's Ember, and welcome to another guest edition of AniTube Digest, where we go over the best and not so best anime YouTube videos from this past week. This video will cover July 13th through the 19th, so let's just jump right in. And we're gonna start with the videos that I thought were not good. Just one this week, but it was quite the doozy. It's Yu Yu Hakusho, Dated Time Capsule or Timeless Classic by the Anime Misfit. Man, this was definitely a video, and I was actually kind of excited going into it, because it's like, I love Yu Yu Hakusho. It's like one of my favorite anime of all time. So I was excited to see some interesting anime analysis on one of my favorite anime, to see another perspective on it, to see what do you have to say. And the biggest problem with this video is that it's just a complete clusterfuck of ideas that A, don't make any sense, and B, just don't relate to each other in any capacity whatsoever. Like, I actually had to take a few notes just to keep track of everything that he said in this video. The first tip-off that this was probably not going to be the best video was that he, fairly early into the video, he starts comparing Yu Yu Hakusho to, K-On! And other slice-of-life anime, and makes this generalization about slice of life in general, about how they all start to feel the same after a while, which is very much not true. If you watch a lot of good slice-of-life anime, they will all feel very distinct from each other. They all have the subtle nuances that make a great show a great show. But that aside, why are you comparing Yu Yu Hakusho to K-On! Or Horimiya or Watamote? These are the examples he brings up in this video. Those are not good comparisons to make, and I really don't understand why you brought them up in any capacity. It's just so... I'm genuinely confused by it. I'm genuinely confused. And there's also a lot of just generic buzzwords that don't really mean anything that he uses a lot throughout this video. He constantly refers to Yu Yu Hakusho as timeless, which, quite personally, I don't think is a really good criticism or assessment, positive or negative criticism of a series, because it doesn't really mean anything. You could interpret anything to be timeless, and also being timeless is not necessarily a positive. Sometimes being set in a specific period is a benefit for, or sometimes feeling like it comes from a specific time period is a benefit. And then now just thinking about it, he goes on to contradict himself again. By talking about how it feels nostalgic and it feels from a previous era. So is it timeless or is it not? So, but anyway, he uses a lot of buzzwords. He refers to stuff like Yu Yu Hakusho and Bebop, and he uses footage from Outlaw Star and refers to these anime as timeless, but he doesn't really say why. He doesn't go in detail about any of that. He just sort of makes that statement and then moves on to something else. So, yeah. What else happened? Oh, and then he, another part I was genuinely confused by is he compares it to JoJo at some point, and he states that JoJo takes itself completely seriously, which I disagree with. I think Araki is very knowledgeable about how silly his story is. So that was a weird comparison. It also implies that Yu Yu Hakusho doesn't take itself seriously, which, again, it very much does. So, again, a lot of these points are just super confusing, especially in the way that they're worded, and it doesn't make a lot of sense when it comes out. But then also, like, at the end of the JoJo comparison, he says, are you seriously comparing a 90s anime to JoJo? Which makes me wonder if he knows that JoJo is an older series. Like, does he know that JoJo didn't start in 2012? Does he know that it's a manga that started in the 80s? Again, so much really unclear, not thought out writing in this script that makes me really wonder if he knows any of what he's talking about. What else? He completely mischaracterizes the second half, well, Yu Yu Hakusho in general, but specifically he makes a note about how the second half of the series becomes much more, almost completely all fighting, and the implication of that being that it has much less character building, I guess, which not only is a gross mischaracterization of the second half of Yu Yu Hakusho. Some of the most important character writing is in the second half, and it delegates plenty of time to that. All of the stuff with the contrast between Yusuke and Sensui as spirit detectives, Yusuke's relationship with Raiden, that's all there. But also, the first half was also very much mostly fighting. Outside of the first 5 episodes, where it wasn't even a battle series yet, most of Yu Yu Hakusho was fighting. So, I'm not sure where he pulled that from. And he also makes this point about how you can just jump in anywhere with Yu Yu Hakusho as compared to other shows that have more continuous narratives. And, like, he says, like, also, it's kind of like Bebop in that sense. Bebop is the best at this, but Yu Yu Hakusho is still pretty good at it. I'm like, first of all, you definitely can jump into Yu Yu Hakusho at any point and get a general idea of what's going on. The dialogue is not that complex, even late into the series. But also, Bebop is an episodic story. It is specifically designed to be self-encapsulating. Like, Yu Yu Hakusho is not designed to be that. These are fundamental differences in how the story was approached. It's not like they're both trying to do this. So, adding that point in was just so out of left field. I don't understand. And even when he talks about the technical aspects of the series, it's just it's like not only false, but just completely like, what are you saying? Like, he mentions that the details in the background are very simple, and it's not a super detailed background. And like some of the instances he uses is where it's just like bright white light as backgrounds or something. But then he uses a shot of the demon world where we see the dense foliage and the giant, like, goblet-shaped mountains with all these details on it in the part where he's talking about how the backgrounds aren't very detailed. So, clearly incorrect. And you can just watch the video and see how incorrect what he's saying is. Then he goes on to use the word graphics when describing animation. Ugh. Oh my god. Pro tip. They're not graphics. Which is very odd because at one point he says, near the end of the video, he says, maybe I'm just too much of a boomer. I'm like, no, it's not that. You use the word graphics when talking about animation. If anything, that's a very zoomer thing to say. Not boomer. So, yeah, and there are some good points in this video. Like, he talks about how some of the how the dialogue builds characterization in ways that aren't just supremely obvious. They're more like how the character speaks informs this about the character. So there are some good ideas in this video, but overall it's just a fucking convoluted mess that doesn't really say anything. And that's really disappointing. Alright, next we have the videos I thought were decent with an asterisk. So, videos that I thought were almost, yes, this is good. There are just a couple notable problems that I think keep it from being wholly good. First one of these is by AlexEnterprises, The Artistic Evolution of One Piece. Now, in general, it's a pretty okay video. It has some really interesting points about Oda as an artist. I especially liked how he showed some of Oda's not manga artwork, how he's actually an incredibly realist in a lot of his illustrations. So that was a fun thing to learn about Oda. And that he brought up the point about how some fans complain that the series is too cartoony looking, but he also mentions that that is kind of the point of the series. Like, the more cartoony art style is what allows One Piece to look so good and to be so expressive, which I 100% agree with. So, I like that. What keeps this video from being higher up for me, though, is he really doesn't say a whole lot about, specifically, about the artistic evolution of One Piece. Like, he makes one point about the manga about how the transition from the Rookie Saga to the New World to the Final Sea Saga, or whatever it's called, as during the time skip switch, it goes from the characters being more elasticy and exaggerated to a bit more realistic and more detailed. And that's kind of the only point that he makes for the manga, and he doesn't really go in depth with a lot of it, so it was a little underwhelming, I want to say. I was hoping for a lot more details about the specific artistic choices of One Piece in this video. And he talks about the anime too as well. Like, he talks about how the Wano arc in particular has this Japanese wall scroll aesthetic to it, and how that, like, the shift away from the more standard style that One Piece had so long makes, and how that changes the approach that the narrative has as well. Like, how this is a bit more of a classical feel to it. It's got the character designs are a bit thick, have thicker line work and stuff like that. So that was interesting. But again, those are really the only two specific points that he brings up, and a lot of it is just kind of, I'm not going to say fluff, but just very general speak about how good Oda's art is and how incredible Oda is as an artist. And I agree with those points. I agree with what you are saying in this video. I was just hoping for a bit more on the specifics of it. Maybe you just wanted this to be like a nice 10-minute video that didn't overstay its welcome, but I like my detail. I like my meat in... I'm like Luffy, I like the meat in my analysis videos. So, yeah, again, not a bad video. It's pretty decent. I was just hoping for a little bit more with it. Alright, after that we have Let's Talk About Pacing, featuring Hunter x Hunter's Chimera Ant arc. This is by Evynne, or Evynne. I'm sorry, I've never learned how you pronounce your channel name, but anyway. So this video, it's a good video overall again, but I think my problem with it is the title very much implies that she's going to be talking about the pacing in Hunter x Hunter's Chimera Ant arc. And she doesn't really... the video is much more about... the video is much more about just the general concept of subjective and objective criticism, and how, and she points out that people shouldn't be saying that the pacing, if the pacing is slow for the Chimera Ant-Arc, which both she and I disagree with, I believe, but if the pacing is painfully slow at certain points, that doesn't make, or if the pacing is slower, that doesn't inherently make it a flaw. It's a video about objective versus subjective language and criticism, which I am definitely all about. I am very much of the very, very subjectivist mindset when it comes to criticism. So I definitely agree with the points that she makes in this video. Again, it's mostly just the title that throws me off with this one, because I was expecting like some specific instances of how the pacing in the Chimera Ant-Arc works, and that's just not what the video is about at all. So, knowing that, I think it's a better video. Although it is pretty much just the same subjectivist argument that we try to regurgitate over and over again and try to get people to understand. So, and of course no one ever understands it, so I can understand why it needs to be said over and over again, but yeah, it's okay. It is an okay video. And I enjoyed myself. Just wish it had, again, I like my details in my analysis videos. I like that. So, yeah, that's okay. Alright, next up we have The Egoless Monster, a Nier analysis by Oukan. Now, in general, I actually like this video quite a bit. In terms of like the script and what he actually says in this video, I like pretty much all the content in it. It's just a very, very hyper detailed analysis of, and you even, Oukan, you sell yourself short in this video, by the way, dude. You like describe it as a mini character analysis and not like a full analysis, but there is a decent chunk of stuff that you talk about in this. It's decently fleshed out. I mean, yeah, it could be longer. You could go more in depth with it, but I wouldn't have qualified it like that. You don't sell yourself short, man. Your script was good. It goes very in depth into a lot of the details about Nier's character in Death Note. I specifically, I really liked how you go into the meaning behind names and how this character's name means different things, like root-wise, in terms of like the meaning of names and stuff. So, as someone who, when I was writing my own fiction, that's how I came up with character names, I appreciated that quite a lot. But yeah, and it's just very nicely detailed, very well thought out. It's a good analysis. But there are two tiny script notes that I want to make. On the first is the way you structure the video. You kind of like speak the different sections of your script, and so it feels like you're speaking the points of an outline. So it feels a little artificial there, not very natural. So I would try and come up with some more interesting transitions between different parts of the script. And also, you say right at the beginning of the video that you don't understand why people hate Nier so much, and maybe I'm just out of the loop on Death Note, modern Death Note discussion. I watched it back in 2012, and I haven't rewatched it since, and I'm hoping my mindset changes, but I was one of the people who thought that the back third of Death Note was a notable downgrade in quality. But again, that's my 9 years ago brain talking, so hopefully I'm wrong. But anyway, you'd say why you don't understand why people... You say you don't understand why people think so badly of Nier, and you also say that you imply that you read a lot of Death Note discussion. And it should be pretty apparent why people don't like Nier. It's the general problem with the back third of Death Note, is that he seems too smart. He seems like he's getting handed script notes on how to proceed. That's the general consensus, I think, on the people who dislike the end of Death Note. So, again, maybe I'm just out of the loop on discussion and that's just kind of died off, but whatever. On the technical side, though, would definitely suggest improving the visuals for this, because otherwise there's no point in me watching this, because it's basically just still shots. And you state that you're not, you're kind of afraid of copyright and stuff. So, pro tips, no clips longer than 7 seconds. And if you want to use audio from the show, like you said you were going to in this, you can use the audio, but maybe chop it up a little bit and layer it over scenes where that audio isn't from. So take this audio from one scene, layer clips from a different scene over it. Because otherwise, it's without visual accompaniment, this is a bit of a boring video, visually speaking. So, and people don't want to. I'm sorry. But yeah. So again, the ideas in this video were really solid. So don't sell yourself short and try to put some effort into the visual presentation. Alright, now it's time for the videos that I thought were good. These are just straight up good. Not the best, but they were good. Overall, on the whole, very good. We're going to start with KorewaEden. Dragon Maid is breaking the internet. Yeah, just very typical kind of video for KorewaEden. Just nice, fast-paced, comedic delivery about how good Dragon Maid is. And I think this is one of several KyoAni-centric videos that came out in the past week and are coming out this month in general. And this one definitely stands out in that it's not the very somber, contemplative kind that you would expect considering the circumstances. This is just Eden being Eden, and he's just going full force ahead with it being a very excitable and happy video. And I think that's important at this time, to make not everything about this situation has to be bleak. So I appreciate that a lot. Some of the jokes didn't quite land as expected, but on the whole, I've laughed a pretty decent chunk throughout this video. Again, it's just super peppy and fast-paced, and I love it. Yeah. It's all. Yeah, it's just good. I wish I had more to say about it, but I'm trying to think if there are any jokes in particular that stood out. But notable fixation on Kobayashi's quote-unquote Fuda cock. That was the little bit of just very jarring. It's very jarring to just hear the word Fuda cock in an anime YouTube video. And he mentions that there about the second he briefly mentions how AniTwitter was getting in a bit of a fuss over the second episode of Dragon Maid, and his stance seems to be just ignore it and focus on how fun this show is, which for the most part I agree with. I haven't seen the second episode myself, but I know kind of what the controversy is. I'm not saying it doesn't merit discussion. I think anything in anime media analysis merits discussion, but I do like that he is just sort of powering through and just focusing on what he likes about the best about this series. It you don't have to incorporate every single detail. Alright, after that we have The Kings of One Piece, Not Your Average Shonen by Kato. And I believe it was Zero specifically who did this video, I think. God, I hope I'm right. Hopefully. Anyway, so this one is about the characters in One Piece who are kings, like the respective kings of respective kingdoms and such. This video was particularly like the general thesis he has is how a true king is self-sacrificing for their people, which is very coincidentally. I just literally yesterday, I was reading volume 15 of One Piece, and which is where Wapol is a major character in it. Wapol being the former king of Drum Island, who what's the word? He basically neglects his people to the point of them starting to die, all for the sake of himself. And they bring that up in this video as well. Just generally pretty solid analysis of One Piece. And the specific king characters. I love me some One Piece analysis, especially now that I'm actually getting into One Piece and learning more about it. So I do wish, again, visually not the most interesting video. It's just panning shots of screen caps. In this particular instance, I understand why, because One Piece is by Toei Animation, and Toei is extremely litigious with this kind of stuff, and they throw out strikes left and right. I had one of my videos taken down last month when I covered Sailor Moon, so again, I understand the hesitation towards using actual footage there. There are some workarounds if you don't mind your video looking a little bit more garish, like from experiment a bit. Obviously, not losing your channel is important. Believe me, I know. But experiment a bit to find some more interesting visual presentation. There was a point where that I was a little confused as to why he brought up. Again, I'm not super into modern One Piece discussion, but at one point he brings up how you can't appreciate One Piece's big moments without the context for the series, and my immediate thought was, obviously? Like, I guess he's making reference to how when you show he's making reference to when you show people clips from One Piece that are supposed to be super emotional and incredible, like when Nami finally asks Luffy for help with Arlong and he puts his hat on her. And I guess he's pointing out that these moments don't carry a lot of hype out of context, as opposed to, I guess, other shonen stories. I don't think I necessarily... I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. I can understand, like, a flashier series, like episode 19 of Demon Slayer. I can understand why that would hype people up without context. So, I guess I kind of understand. It just seemed like a weird point to make. But otherwise, pretty solid analysis. Very much looking forward to seeing the other characters that you brought up in this video as I continue reading One Piece. Alright, next we have Exploring Love Through Makoto Shinkai's Films by OtakuDaiKun. This one's just it was a pretty, I'm surprised I hadn't seen this kind of analysis before. I'm sure it exists somewhere else, but I'm surprised I hadn't seen it before. The general premise of the video is, Daikun, he takes Shinkai's major works, lays them out chronologically and shows how as Shinkai's career progresses, he becomes, Daikun describes it as less cynical and less negative towards romance as a concept, and how in his earlier works like Voices of a Distant Star and 5 centimeters per second, the characters are much more resigned to the fates of being separated from their loves, whereas his more recent works like Weathering with You and Your Name, the characters actually are much more proactive and actually fight for that love. So I'm sure someone else has done it, but this was my first exposure to it, and just generally pretty solid analysis. Really hones in on a lot of the core details of the characters. I haven't seen all of Shinkai's films, but I've seen a lot of the ones he talks about in this video, so I can generally get a sense of what he's talking about, and it's very accurate to that. And he also talks about he has a lot of anecdotes about how his life kind of parallels this shift in the writing, where his earlier romantic affairs were a bit more negative or cynically tinged, and now that he's married and has a loving wife and such, that he's much more invested, I guess, in his love. So I'm happy for you on that, Daikun. Yeah, just generally really pretty solid analysis. Although this part, just purely my personal preference, obviously. But I almost didn't include this video because I almost couldn't get through it because of your voice. Again, just my personal preference, but you sound like Robot Ben Shapiro. I'm sorry. It was really hard for me to get through. So it's mostly the inflection, mostly the inflection, but otherwise solid analysis. All right, next we have Don't Miss Out on This Slick Chinese Anime by Replay Value. There's this one. They're talking about Link Click, I believe it's called. Yeah, Link Click, and this, I had only just heard about this anime a couple days ago, I think. It was this, like, aside from Odd Taxi being the sleeper hit of the spring season, apparently this one is also a sleeper hit of the spring season. I hadn't heard anything about it. I haven't. It's interesting how we had that mini explosion of Chinese anime back around the time of the first season of The King's Avatar, and then we haven't really heard much from it since, even though there's tons of them still coming out. Not a lot of people are watching them, so it's fun. So it's good to see these shows still getting this kind of exposure. And for the most part, Replay Value definitely sells me on this show. Aside from just tropes that I generally hate, I am very much interested in watching the show now because of his review of this kind of show. And he gives it a fair shake. Like, he points out obviously some of the flaws. He doesn't overhype this show, so just generally really solid analysis. He makes a great job of highlighting the key points of what would interest someone in this show. Because again, this is like no one's heard of this show. No one's heard of this except for like a few people. So you really have to sell people on, is this worth your time? And highlighting time travel, obviously a very important point there. People like time travel. Not me, though. I generally dislike time travel, surprisingly. Like, Steins Gate is pretty much the only one that I like. And maybe Tokyo Revengers, but I've only seen the first episode. But, yeah, really hones in on the unique aspects of the series and it sounds genuinely original, being able to travel back in time for a set session through photographs. a pretty interesting premise. So, and generally pretty well edited video. The specific clips that he used generate a lot of intrigue for me as someone who may or may not watch this show. So, just generally strong analysis. And then we have Roundtable with the Wonder Egg Priority International Animation Staff by Anime Lockdown. I guess Anime Lockdown is like a channel dedicated to hosting like panels, like you would see at like an anime convention, but it's virtual. So definitely going to be checking out a lot of these videos in the future if that's their general shtick. But this one in particular is about the international production of Wonder Egg Priority. It features two people from the staff, Far, who did translation work for the layouts and storyboards and stuff so that animators could understand what the directors wanted, and Blue, who was basically like a production assistant, I guess, from an overseas production assistant from what I heard, generally understood. So there was a lot of information to dig through in this panel, and it was very insightful. I know a lot of, with the final episode of Wonder Egg being the spectacular disaster that it was, at least according to Twitter. I still haven't seen it yet, but it's hard to miss the discussion about it. So with that being as high profile of an incident as it was, it's really interesting to see how the international staff that was brought on to work on the series functioned. If you're not entirely in the know, around episode 9 of Wonder Egg eventually got delayed because of production issues, and that pushed the entire series back an episode. So it just kept, and then it just kept getting more and more behind schedule, and like animation, from what I've understood, animation work was literally being submitted the day of or week of or a few days before episodes were due, and then the finale got pushed back 3 months, and then half the finale was recap and the other half was not substantial narratively or visually, from what I've been told. So it was interesting to see, and this was definitely this particular production made very heavy use of international talent, basically going to Twitter and polling artists to see if they can do a cut for an episode. And so it was interesting to see the business end of things. Like, it would have also been cool if they had gotten an animator specifically for this panel, but even just the business people alone, like having someone who has to, it's something you don't think about. Like, these jobs that these are very silent jobs that people don't think about. Like, if anime is going to expand its workforce into the international market, translators are going to be real important. And so having someone not only be able to translate what the director is saying, but also translate how workflow is supposed to go in regards to creating key animation and layouts and then sending it off to in-betweeners and stuff like that. Being able to communicate that is an extremely important job, and it's fascinating to hear Far talk about that, and Blue just being a general production assistant about how having to streamline stuff that is on the global scale. It was just a fascinating listen. It was also fun to hear their thoughts on Shin Wakabayashi as a director. Both of them portray him as this very extremely ambitious, very hyper fixated on details kind of director. And the panel also had a bit of a focus on the development of web generation. Basically people who started their animation work online, I guess, or have a notable online presence as an animator, and are then brought into the industry as regular talent. So people like Ryochimo and Bahi JD and the like. So there was a very interesting discussion about that as well. It, it it's just really fascinating to me hearing actual industry people talk about the stuff that we've only heard from anime analysis people for years. Like, so, very fascinating panel. Had a few technical difficulties, much like Wonder Egg, but yeah, would definitely recommend giving this a listen. It is lengthy. It's a panel, obviously, but it's definitely worth it. All right, and next is Violet Evergarden and the Meaning of Love by Sage's Reign. This one's another KyoAni tribute video, though this one is more in line with the contemplative kind of stuff I mentioned earlier. And it's really solid. Just the general direction of the way Sage takes the thoughts that he has about Violet as a character, and a lot of the details about how she is constructed as a character is really fascinating. Like, just in my general experience, a lot of the Violet Evergarden videos that I've seen are pretty basic and just discuss very surface level stuff. I'm not going to name names, but a lot of them have been a bit underwhelming. But this one definitely digs a bit deeper into, like, the structure of the series and Violet's arc as a character via that structure. I don't want to just reiterate his points over and over, like, beat by beat, but it was a very fun video. Just very, very interesting. I like when my video. Wow, Amber, you like when the videos are interesting? No shit. But yeah, it was just a very well made generally well made video, and the mood is pretty consistent throughout. It's got that very typical, like, chill analysis video vibe to it, with that emotional pull through line to it as well. I will say, though, some of the editing could have been better. Like, the shot choices are nice. It's you're generally picking some pretty strong moments to show visually, but there are a lot of moments where, like, as you're changing from clip to clip, you leave in a few frames of a shot transition, so, like, you get, like, a millisecond shot, like a shot of, like, a few frames before the next clip, and it's a little jarring to look at. So tighten up your editing a little bit, do some more proofreading, I'm excited to see some more of your videos. I'm finding out a lot of cool channels through this project that I haven't heard before, so definitely excited to see more. Alright, and this one, I'm not sure if it's just a decent, you did good video, or if I want to put this in, like, the best. So we'll put it, like, right on the border, and this is All for One, The Image of Evil by Oceaniz. This was a very compelling video. Again, love my hero analysis. I love when it's done well, and Oceaniz generally does it very well. And he brings up a lot of points that I just didn't even consider regarding All for One as a character. Again, I haven't really thought that much about All for One. But Oceaniz points out a lot of things that make it obvious, or make it more apparent as to why I haven't really thought about him. And the general thesis is that he is meant to purposefully be the evil of man incarnate. He starts the video with the Machiavelli quote about how humanity is inherently evil when given the freedom to be so. And just characterize. He points out how All for One is pretty bare bones in terms of characterization, except for the fact that he is just this all-consuming monster who just wants everything. And just the general way that he presents these ideas is extremely compelling, very engaging. The visuals are also pretty strong as well. It's this video overall has a very theatrical, kind of exaggerated, exaggerated tone to it, much like All for One as a character. Like he pulls in these like gothic choirs and stuff for the music. The chapter transitions in the video are all usually pretty solid. Just a pretty well made video. Only minor complaint I would have is some of the font choices for the text, but again, super nitpicky point. Just generally really strong video. The point about the stigmata, I didn't even notice that All for One had stigmata, but the way that you point out that it's sort of a reverse of the general Christ imagery that we associate with stigmata, was very enlightening. So definitely gonna have to pick up when I eventually do a full reread or rewatch of My Hero. I'm gonna keep a lot of these points in mind. This was a really strong video. All right, and now we're on to the best of the best. These are my favorite analysis video or AniTube videos from the past week. There are two in this category. The first one is Raising $100,000 to Get Back at Crunchyroll by Cartoon Cipher. This one covers the AnimeTube controversy that happened in the last week. Really goes in depth into everything, highlights all of the points that it gathers together all the points that everyone's made, and even points out a lot of the things that I didn't even hear about. Like, I didn't know that part of the app was this weird anime girl avatar search engine thing. Like, there was so many details about this particular scandal that, like, even though I was, like, going all in on Twitter trying to look up what exactly was going on with this, like, half of the points in this video were completely new to me. So, it was just generally engaging all the way through. And what I also like about this, aside from the attention to detail, is that he points out that it's obvious why this kind of situation occurred. He recognizes that there are some very notable flaws with how anime licensing and anime streaming currently is in the industry as it is right now. And so he points out that the different elements of this situation that created this kind of controversy in the first place. So I like that it was very balanced like that. It didn't just go all in on just completely hammering AnimeTube for being a fucking scam. But in regards to AnimeTube specifically, man, this was a wild ride. It really was. And Cartoon Cipher just goes point for point about what happened, why it happened, and just how utterly insane and nonsensical it is. And it's just a generally really strong video, well paced, well edited. I saw one of their whoever edited the video on Twitter said that they decided to use anime specifically from the list of anime that AnimeTube was talking about licensing as footage for this video. Because, like, when I watched it, I'm like, wow, there's like two there's like 2 shots from art in this video. Art, that weird historical fiction anime from a couple seasons ago that everyone forgot about immediately. So that was a fun factoid to learn about this video. But yes, if you're interested in the full summary of this situation, would highly recommend this video. They also post updates in the pinned comment below the video, so it is a constantly updating situation. Very entertaining to watch. And finally, we have my favorite video of the week, Cat Soup Kyoto video by KaiserBeamz. This was just phenomenal. It's got everything that I want from an anime analysis video. It's got extreme attention to detail, a lot of research put into it. There's a strong through line of a single idea that branches off into different ideas. Extremely well edited, very quick paced and engaging. Just fucking phenomenal work, my guy. So this video is an analysis of the short film Cat Soup, which I believe the director was Takuya Sato? No, not Takuya Sato. I know Sato is his last name, but it's also a film that is more so attributed to Masaki Yuasa, who is behind the works like Tatami Galaxy and Oukan and Devil May Cry Baby and stuff like that. And KaiserBeamz, he goes all in on dissecting or at least the first half. This video is generally divided into 2 ideas. The first half is analyzing Cat Soup as is and pointing out all the different influences in it and how this is very much a Masaki Yuasa kind of work. But he also goes over in some of the major animators on the project and how they insert their own distinct voices into it as well. And so that was cool to see. I'm becoming a bit of a Sakuga nerd as the years go on, so that was really fun to see. And this short film in particular, I think, made this very captivating for me personally, because I've watched Cat Soup several times, and before this video, I was still trying to figure out what the fuck was going on with a lot of this. And he points out that there is definitely a story going on, but his assertion is that more so this is a vehicle for cool visual ideas rather than cool narrative ideas. There is still a story there, and I'm definitely starting to understand some of the stuff a bit more, but it is definitely a visual feast. And he goes into detail about a lot of the specific instances of that, especially with how the animators. And then there's the second half of the video where we actually get the history behind Cat Soup, which Nekojiro, which I did not know, because I always knew there was another. When I was browsing through my anime list, I always knew there was another version of Cat Soup that was in a shorts style, and I never saw any of it. And what I learned is that Cat Soup is based on a manga, very not avant-garde, but very counterculture kind of manga by the art. I believe the mangaka's name was Nekojiro. And just learning about her general demeanor and her approach towards manga, and just learning about the Cat Soup as a manga, and the gory, subversive, utter nonsense of it was really interesting. I don't want to. There are certain points of this video that I don't want to spoil. Again, this is my favorite video from this week, but there is some dark stuff in the second half of this video that I had no idea about, and he then goes on to use that information to inform Cat Soup the film and some of the choices that were made in that, and it really hits in some moments. It's very there are some heart drop moments. So absolutely love this video. Definitely want to see some more KaiserBeamz videos now. So fucking go watch this one. It's incredible. And that's about it. So, except, funnily enough, when I booked this week for AniTube Digest, I totally forgot that I had a video coming out this week. I put out a video over on Anime News Network's channel about what are hobbies anime. So I can't review it myself because that would be highly biased of me, but I will suggest that you go watch that. So yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, that's about it for AniTube Digest this week. This was a lot of fun filling in for Shabes and getting to be on this side of the argument this time. And it was fun learning how to off the cuff kind of critique in this kind of fashion. So thanks again for watching. Be sure to tune in with whoever's taking over next week. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.